Welcome back to Photoshop. So today we're going to take a look at that mystical world of sharpening. Now, if you've done any time researching sharpening on the internet, especially YouTube, you will have found that there are a whole bunch of different videos that say that their method is the best method to sharpen in Photoshop. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at all those best methods to sharpen in Photoshop and actually find out which one is better. Now, the good thing about this video is you don't actually have to watch it to the end to find out the answer to this question, because the best method to sharpen in Photoshop isn't really a technique, it's how you apply it to your image. So the first thing that we're going to do is find out what sharpening is, how it works, and why we have to sharpen an image in the first place. So what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to sharpen this image, and I'm going to sharpen this image way too much. We're going to go ahead and sharpen it. So we're going to go up here to filter, and I'm going to use sharpen. And in this case, we're just going to use one of the simple methods, smart sharpen. And that's going to bring up a little dialog box. Inside that dialog box, we're going to sharpen this way too much. I'm going to lower this radius down to about 1.5, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to sharpen this image. And what we'll do is we'll just kind of zoom in here and take a look to see what's happening. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Command Z. That's going to undo the sharpening. So you can see how soft it is here and everywhere that there is an edge. So if you look just right here, I am going to reapply the sharpening. And what you can do is you're seeing it's making the image crisper. It's giving it a hard edge. In photography, cameras use what's called an anti-aliasing filter, and that anti-aliasing filter reduces noise in the image. But one of the bad things that it does, it actually softens our image a little bit. A lot of times, and this happened even when you were scanning film, the images come into the computer and then into Photoshop just a little bit soft. So we are sharpening the image to make it a little bit more crisp and natural looking. Now, what might surprise you is sharpening really isn't any sort of like sharpening technique. It's actually an increase of the contrast of an edge. So you're taking the edge and you're increasing the contrast of it. So let's take a look at this file right here. Right here, we've got a gray and a lighter gray, and then we've got an edge. So what I'm going to do right here, and you can see it says a radius of 10, and that's okay. I want to use that. So we're going to go ahead and click this. This is a sharpening method. And what we can see if I turn off this bottom thing is now we've sharpened this edge. Well, it's really easy to see in this image. Right over here, this bottom section, and I'm going to go ahead and turn this next layer on. Right here, it's darkened this bottom section and it's lightened this top section. So the whole way across the image, you can see it's got this dark straight line now below it. And you can see in this original image, this is just a solid gray fill and this is a solid gray fill. So anywhere on this whole image, this gray is exactly the same. But when we applied the sharpening, it darkened this area and kept this area about the same. And right here, it lightened this area. That increase in contrast makes this edge harder. And that's the process of sharpening for any of these methods that we're looking at. They might do it a little bit teeny different, but the algorithm or what the computer is trying to do is to increase the contrast in any method that you'll ever see in Photoshop. It's always done exactly the same. It's contrast of an edge. In this one, notice I put a radius of 10. So what radius means is in pixels, as we can see right here, how far it's going in and out. So if you had a radius of 2, it's going to go 2 pixels this way and 2 pixels this way. If you had 10 pixels, it's going to go 10 pixels this way, 10 pixels this way. So one of the problems that happens when sharpening is you kind of get this white line above it, and people refer to it as a halo. So if you're doing a building, you get these weird halos around buildings, and it doesn't look good. It sharpens your image, but it doesn't look good. It looks like you toned it incorrectly. Picking the pixel amount is going to be important. Normally, we're not going to pick 10. The reason I pick 10 is because it makes it easy for you to see what I'm doing. So one of the things you're going to notice if you use Photoshop a lot is there's a whole bunch of different ways to do the exact same thing. And some people like certain versions of a method better than others. It doesn't make the other method wrong. It's just different. And in Photoshop, you don't need to know 50 different ways to do the same thing. You just need to pick your favorite. So today at the end, I'm going to show you just the simple, easy way to apply sharpening, a really cool method to control it. And then once you're done, you can easily create an action and you never have to think about this process or watch another video on sharpening again. So I've downloaded this image, and this is a raw image that has not been sharpened. And if we come in here and we zoom, and what I really want to look at in this image is this edge, because this is going to be easy to tell where this is happening. So we're going to be looking at this edge. It's going to do it at other edges, but this edge is going to be the easiest to see on a computer. So what we're going to do is I'm going to walk you through all these crazy different ways to sharpen an image. And then we're going to look at them and see which one is the best. So this first method, and we're going to go ahead and make a couple of different layers. What I've done is I've hit Command J a whole bunch of times and I've duplicated this layer so it's exactly the same. And then we're going to go through and just label these at first. So this is going to be called Unsharp Mask. The next one is going to be called Smart Sharpen. We're going to call this High Pass. And then we're going to do the new crazy blur method. So we'll just call it blur method. All right. So we've got all those. And what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and turn everything off except for the first one, which is going to be Unsharp Mask. So let's take a look at this. And we're going to keep some consistency when we do this. One of the things that we'll find out in the end is sharpening really depends on viewing your image at 100%, and we're way past 100%. And it also depends on the size of your image. I'm not really worried about the amount being accurate right now. You're going to see me use an extreme amount of sharpening in some of these. And the reason for that is it's easier for you to see what's happening. So we're going to actually over sharpen these images for right now. So we're going to go up here to filter. We're going to go down to sharpen, and Unsharp Mask was the first sharpening inside of Photoshop, which was really weird because it's sharpen and then it's called Unsharp Mask, which people didn't understand. And they're like, well, why don't you use sharpen? But no, you use Unsharp Mask. And that was our first sharpening method inside of Photoshop. So we're going to try to keep our amount at 100% through all these images. Now in this image, we're going to do a radius of 1. Well, why? Because it's going to go 1 pixel this way and 1 pixel this way on this edge. Another edge, it might do it vertically and horizontally. What it's looking at is the difference in light of the 2 pixels. So it's seeing this edge, it's seeing the pixel on this side and then the pixel on this side. This pixel gets darker, this pixel gets lighter. As you can see, there's this little halo. If I increase this radius, you can see it blurred it out a little bit more, but now it's making it blend out farther. So the larger that your radius is, the more it's going to go out this direction. So usually you're going to want a small radius. Somewhere between 1 and 2 seems to be the most logical. So we'll just do 1.1 because that's the easiest. Now, Unsharp Mask has this thing called threshold. We'll do this twice, I think, just so you can see how this works. But threshold is looking at the lightness in pixels on each side. A threshold of 0 means that every pixel in the whole image is going to be sharpened. Well, do we want the pixels inside of these bricks to be sharpened? No, we just want the edge. So if you were to do a threshold of 0, every single pixel on here is going to be sharpened at 100%. Well, that's not normally going to look good because you're trying to get edge sharpness, not middle of the image sharpness. So if you had skin, it would look really bad because it would make the skin pores look even more pronounced than it normally would. In threshold, you're going to raise this. That's going to determine the areas that get sharpened. So you can see as I raise that, these areas where the pixels are close in brightness aren't getting sharpened. Then the areas where there's an edge, they are getting sharpened because the brightness is 10, or in this case, 17 pixels brighter or darker. So what we'll do is we'll just come down here and maybe we'll do looks like 10 is a little, 10, 11, 12. Looks pretty good. So we're getting edge sharpness, but we're not getting sharpness right here. So we're going to go ahead and hit OK. And there's our Unsharp Mask. So let's go ahead and turn Smart Sharpen on and make sure it's selected. And then we're going to go up here and go down to Filter, Sharpen, and then Smart Sharpen. Unsharp Mask was around forever. And then they decided, hey, threshold's a little bit complicated, or just this whole concept is a little complicated for people. So let's make Smart Sharpen. So Smart Sharpen came out and you can even really get advanced into it. Now we're not going to go ahead and play with that stuff. We're just going to keep it simple for this. There are some presets that we have up here. So if you wanted to load a preset or save a preset, you could do that. So once again, we're going to make our amount the same. So we'll do 100%. We're going to do a radius and keep that the same. So we're going to do 1.1. We're not going to reduce the noise. So it's not going to do any noise reduction. I would do that separately. But notice that we don't have threshold in this. Well, why? Because in Smart Sharpen, the computer is trying to analyze and find the hard edges, and it's trying to sharpen them. Now, the problem with this is it's just looking at differences in the image. It's not really seeing the image. It's just looking for differences. So it's trying to do its best to edge sharpen. In this case, we're going to go ahead and hit OK. And there we go. So I will turn this one off. So this is Smart Sharpen that we're viewing. And then if we see this, this is Unsharp Mask. And you can see actually in Unsharp Mask, this area isn't getting sharpened as much as it is in Smart Sharpen. So Smart Sharpen isn't quite doing as good, as far as I'm concerned, as Unsharp Mask is. So let's take a look at the next one. So we're going to go ahead and turn on High Pass. And so High Pass has been a popular one for a very, very long time. It's really simple. So High Pass is very similar to high frequency separation. What you're looking at is you're trying to extract the details out of an image. In this case, I'm looking up here, and that's the number I want to get. We're at 740%, so we can remember that. So I'm just going to zoom out so we can see this whole image, because it's going to make a little more sense once we do this. We're going to go up here to Filter, Other, High Pass. Now, normally I do a radius of 2. Now we've been doing 1.1. So remember 1.1, we're doing that. In this case, I'm going to do a little bit more. I'm going to do 2. And the reason for this is you can lower it. And it's also easier for you to see it. And as I raise this radius, you can see it's sharpening those edges more. And it's also increasing that blur, or that amount, that radius out is getting that halo more. Now, once again, just like all the other methods, as we increase that radius, it's blending it out more. We're getting more sharp. We're going to get a stronger and more of a halo because it's going to extend that out of the edge for 5 pixels. In this case, it's going to be 4.7 pixels. So what we'll do is we'll type in that 1.1 and we'll keep this exactly the same as the others. So we have that consistency, and then we'll go ahead and hit OK. Now, after you've done High Pass, you need to choose a blending mode. So we're going to go up here to Normal, and we're going to drop down, and we're going to go to Overlay, Soft Light, Hard Light, Vivid Light, Linear Light, Pin Light, or Hard Mix. And in this case, you're going to be looking at from Overlay to Linear Light. These are the contrast blending modes. So remember, in Photoshop, we are increasing the contrast of the edge to sharpen. The way this works is, and this is the simplest way to look at it, Overlay will give you the least amount of sharpening. Soft Light will give you a little bit more. Hard Light will give you even more. Vivid Light will give you more than that. And Linear Light is going to give you the strongest amount of sharpening. So in this case, we will stick with, we'll do Vivid Light. It's hard to duplicate the amount of 100% in Smart Sharpen and Unsharp Mask because the method we're using is just a little bit different. as far as how much sharpening. So we're just going to guess, and we're going to say vivid light is the way to go. So now I can turn this on and off, and you can see we're getting a lot of sharpening. Now the cool thing is, if it's too much, you can just lower the opacity of this layer and it will lessen the amount of sharpening. I will show you when we get to the final sharpening methods. When you use any of these, one aspect that you can do is turn these into a smart layer, and it allows you to go back in and change the amount of sharpening when you're doing it. But for right now, we're just trying to keep things simple. So we've got our high pass sharpening layer. Now let's zoom back in. So we're going to go up to that plus 740 that we saw before. I guess we can't get it, so we'll get close and let's go find that edge. All right, so there's our high pass. Let's turn this on and off, on and off. And you can see once again right here, it's got the white on that edge and it's got dark on the other edge. And since we've got this up, we can see I can change this to overlay, and you can see that it's going to do a little bit less sharpening. And if I do linear light, it's going to do a little bit more sharpening. In this case, we're going to take it back to vivid light. Now the last method is a little bit different. We needed actually another layer. So I'm going to click on the background layer and I'm going to hit Command J, and we're just going to drag that up, and we'll just leave it as background copy just so it's easy to identify, because we're going to have to group these two layers together to get this to work. So the way that this method works is, what we're going to do is we're going to click on blur, and we're going to invert it. Now the command key for this is Command or Control I. So you're inverting your image. Now once the image is inverted, and I'm going to go ahead and show you how to convert this to a smart object. So I'm going to go out here into this gray area. I'm going to right click, and you're going to see right down here we have Convert to Smart Object. And the reason that we're going to do this is going to allow us to control or go back into the sharpening amount. But what's weird is we're actually not going to use sharpening this time. We're going to actually blur it. And in turn, because this image is inverted, it's going to actually sharpen it. So let's go ahead and change this blending mode to vivid light. And voila, look at that. You'll notice that we got that weird gray effect that we saw before, just like in high pass, but we did it a different way. So we're going to go up to Filter, Blur, and then go down to Gaussian Blur. And as we blur our image, notice we're getting that sharpening just like we did before. It works a little bit differently, but it's very close. So we're going to once again do the same amount, which is a radius of 1.1, and we're going to go ahead and hit OK. Now the trick for this method, it's a little bit complicated, is we need to group this. So we're going to take the background layer and the blur layer and put that in a group, which is Command or Control G. And then once we have that done, we'll go ahead and do this, and we'll call this blur method. We're going to change the blending mode here to overlay. So when we do that, that in effect is giving us the exact same sharpening that we saw before. So let's go ahead and zoom in over here so you can see that is the different method. So this is the high pass look, and this is the blur method sharpening. So let's go ahead and turn all these off. And let's look at these one at a time. The first one here is the blur method, and we turn that off. You can see what the image looks like unsharpened. If we turn that on, it is sharpening in this area a little bit, but it's giving us a nice edge. The pixel radius in all these is going to be exactly the same because we always used 1.1. That halo or glow on the edge should be exactly the same in all the different methods. So we'll go ahead and we're going to turn this off, and then we'll come down here and go to high pass. And you can see the high pass method is giving us sharpening. It looks like we're getting more sharpening than we did in the blur method above. Now that has to do with the blending mode that we picked. So if we want to lower that amount, I can come over here and just lower this opacity, and it's lowering the amount of sharpening that we're seeing in the image. Then we're going to come and highlight Smart Sharpen and turn Smart Sharpen. And you can see, just like the others, it's sharpening that edge. We've got a 1 pixel radius, and it is sharpening these pixels here a little bit. And then if we come down to Unsharp Mask, this has the least amount of sharpening of all of them. And then right here, you can tell that the sharpening isn't anywhere as strong as it is here. We've got 1 pixel radius, and yes, we are sharpening. Now, personally, my favorite method of sharpening is still Unsharp Mask. However, I do use Smart Sharpen a lot, and sometimes I use High Pass. It really depends on the image and what I'm trying to sharpen. You're going to sharpen a portrait and a building or architect or landscapes completely different from each other. Depending on the image, I might change the way that I sharpen a little bit. So let's go to this image here of this woman, and we're going to hit Command 0 so it zooms out. We are going to assume that this is perfectly toned, okay? We're going to assume it. This image has not been toned, but we're just going to assume it's been perfectly toned. The first thing I would do is I would save this image as a PSD file or save it to my files. So I come in here, I'd hit Command, I do a save as command or save as copy. If you're new to Photoshop, you do need copy ticked now. And if you want to save something other than a Photoshop file, like a JPEG, you have to do the save as copy. But in my case, I'm just going to do the save as. That's going to allow me to select Photoshop. And I would save this as a toned but unsharpened image. So why is that important to save this as a saved but unsharpened? The reason is you never want to sharpen your image until you've sized it. So in this case, I've toned it. I just want to save it so I can always go back to the original. I don't want to sharpen it. Well, the reason I don't want to sharpen it is because I might have to size this 5x7, 8x10, 1000 pixels. And each one of those sizes is going to be sharpened a different amount. And it doesn't matter which one of those methods that I showed you before, each one is going to be sharpened completely differently. If you remember in the beginning of the video, I said, it's not the method, it's how you apply the sharpening. So the first thing that we need to know when we're sharpening an image is we need to size the image to its final output size. So we would come up here and we'll just do it the simple way. We're going to go up to image size. And let's say I'm going to make this inch. We're going to change this to inches. We're going to change this back to automatic. So everybody has it the same. And let's say we're going to do this at 300 pixels per inch. And we're going to do this at 10 inches. So we're going to then we're going to click OK. It's going to size this image down. Now, right up here, you see it says this image on my screen, and this is going to be different on everybody's screen. So I have a high resolution screen. So how you view your image at 100% and how I view my image at 100% might be completely different. But what we need to do is we need to get the image at 100% so we can see how the sharpening is affecting it. Now I can either come in here and hit Command plus a couple times until we get 100% right here, or you could have went to View and then you could drop down here to where it's 100%, and that quick key is Command 1 or most likely Control 1 on a PC, but I'm not sure. So now we're viewing our image at 100%, and this is going to give us an accurate representation when we sharpen it of what our final image when it would be printed out or viewed on screen of what it should look like. So next we need to now go in and sharpen our image. So we're going to go up here to filter. And in this case, we're just going to go down here to other, and we're going to go to filter, sharpen, and we'll go ahead and we're going to do all those different methods that we saw before. And I'm going to show you how to do the smart application of sharpening in those. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have to hit Command J a whole bunch of times, like one more time. And we will turn all these layers off. And right here, we've got the Unsharp Mask method. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to right click this method. We're going to right click and we're going to come down here and say, turn this into a smart object. because a smart object is going to give us something called smart filters. Smart filters are non-destructive, meaning we can go back in and edit them. So if I do sharpen this image and it's too much or too little, it's really easy to go back in and change it. So we'll go up here to filter, down to sharpen, and unsharp mask. Now right here, once again, notice this little view box is saying 100%. So why do they say 100%? Because they know that you need to be viewing your image at 100%. But this little box can be difficult to look at. You know, you're going to have to kind of scroll around just to find an important area on the image. You can see if I move this and this is exactly the same. And this is going to give you a preview of what your sharpening amount looks like. However, it is applying it to this. So we're seeing it here and we're seeing it here. If we uncheck preview, it's going to remove the amount of sharpening from the image. So we're not going to see it. I don't know why anybody would want it unchecked. Right here, we've got that radius that we talked about, 1.1. We've got the amount, so how much it's going to be sharpened. And then we've got the threshold. So if we put our threshold down to 0, every pixel in this whole image, in essence, is going to be sharpened. Well, we don't want her skin to be sharpened. It's going to accentuate the moles and every freckle and everything on her face. We don't want that. So we want to increase this threshold quite a bit. So where there's a small brightness difference between pixels, we don't want to sharpen those. We only want areas where it's really strong. So where you have black and white, where you have that hard edge of your image. So in this case, all these little dots are most likely going to all be sharpened, but we don't really necessarily need these dots on the dress to be sharpened. Now we might want the flowers to be sharpened, but do we want the background and the dress and the skin to be sharpened? No. So there's a couple different ways to attack this, but we're going to go ahead and we'll make this threshold of, let's say 15. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to change the amount. So as we lower this amount, we're going to get less sharpening in the image. As we raise this up, we're going to get more sharpening. The problem with amount is you can go way overboard when you're beginning and your image is going to look way over sharpened and it's not going to look good. The hard thing is, how much does each image need to be sharpened? Well, remember, it's going to be determined on the size of an image. An image that's 10 inches at 300 pixels, let's say 100% looks good. If you were to size this down to 5 inches, this would be way too much sharpening for this image. So the smaller the file size of the image, you're going to use less amount of sharpening for the image. If you did a web size image at 100%, it would just be extremely over sharpened. In this image, we're going to go ahead and we're going to lower this to maybe, let's see, 74. 74 doesn't look too bad. That's giving us some nice sharpening and it doesn't look over sharpened. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, and bam, just like that, it looks pretty good. So let's zoom into our face so we can see what we did here. So I'm going to turn the Unsharp Mask off, on, and you can see it's very subtle. It's just a little bit of a hard edge, and that looks extremely good. And we're not seeing over sharpening in the skin. Now, if you have an area that you don't want sharpened, notice we've got a little mask right here. And in a mask, you can apply the color black. So we're going to come over here. We're going to make this color black. I'm going to paint this into the mask right in here. Normally I would do a better job, but you can see now it's hiding that. But I don't need sharpening here. We need it in the hair. We don't need this out of focus area sharpened, so we can remove it from there. And if I really wanted to get into this, I could come up here and go into her forehead and I could paint black all over the skin areas that I don't want sharpened as well. You'll remember I said it's not which method you use, it's how you apply it. So in this case, I'm telling Photoshop, hey, don't sharpen in this area because I don't want to alter it. It's not benefiting me. This is the first one. This is our Unsharp Mask right here. So we'll go ahead and turn this off. We're going to turn this next one on. We're going to call this Smart Sharpen. The next step in this is to right click, turn this into a smart object. We're going to come up here to filter, We're going to drop down to sharpen, go to smart sharpen this time. We are using that amount of 74. We're going to keep that radius at 1.1 and we're going to go ahead and hit OK. And there's our smart sharpen, exactly the same as we did before. Now we have a mask that we can apply. And since I already created the mask, I can hold Alt or Option on my keyboard. So that's Option on a Mac and Alt on a PC. And I can just drag this up and duplicate that. Do you want to replace it? Yes. Once again, we're using Smart Sharpen, but we're using an intelligent filter. And the way you go in and change this is if we want to change the amount because it's not quite enough, you just click on Smart Sharpen. So we'll double click that, we'll launch it. And then I could go in here and I could make it a lot more. I could make it a lot less. In this case, I'm just going to hit cancel because we don't want to do that. We're going to come in here. I'm going to turn this method on. We're going to call this high pass. Hit OK. All right, now that we've got this labeled high pass, I can right click this, convert it to a smart object. We can go up here to filter, other, high pass. We're going to leave that at 1.1 because all of our radiuses are at 1.1. You can see now it's picking up the detail in an image. The way this works is everything that we see that's gray is 50% gray. And in Photoshop, the blending mode that we're going to use when you use a contrast blending mode, it doesn't apply it to anything that's 50% gray. So all this 50% gray, no sharpening is going to be applied to it. So just areas where we see detail or contrast is where areas where we're going to have sharpening applied. So that's reason that you see this kind of weird gray effect. It's just showing you 50% gray, and in the 50% gray areas, nothing happens. So we'll go ahead and hit OK. After that's been applied, you're going to come up here, you're going to drop down. And I think last time we did vivid light. This time we'll go ahead and use overlay. It's not going to make that much of a difference. And you can see once again, we're getting that sharpening. Now in this method, you don't want to drag this mask up here. It doesn't work. So what you're going to do is make sure that high pass is selected. You're going to create a mask. And then to remove it, you're just going to take black. And you're going to go into the areas where you don't want the sharpening to be applied. And which is the skin areas. We're not going to get up there, but we'll come in here and we'll do all of this area right here. So you're just applying the mask. And in this case, you want to apply the mask here, not here. And you could do that for all these. You could always apply the mask in the layer right here instead of this layer. All right, so that looks good. So now we've got these all done. So the last thing that we have is this last one. So we're going to have to turn this on twice. We're going to call this blur. And that looks pretty good. So the way blur works, we hit Command I to invert. We change this blending mode to vivid light. That gives us that funky, weird look that we see there before. We're going to put these two layers in a group. So Command G, call this blur. And you want to change this to overlay. And once again, that is the blur. Now to apply the blur, you're just going to open this up. You're going to go into the blur layer and we're going to go up into blur, Gaussian blur. And this is where we set that amount. We're going to use 1.1, which is going to give us that radius of 1.1. So just like before, we're doing that exact same method, except for it's done just a little bit different way. So we'll click on the blur there. We're going to duplicate it. I will hold my Alt Option, grab this and drag it up here. And that way we've duplicated that mask. So let's go ahead and zoom into her face and see if we can really tell the difference between any of these methods that we have here. Now on these two images right here, I didn't paint it on her skin, and we'll start with it off and then we'll go in and look at it. So let's turn this off, close this, turn all these layers on. So the first one, Unsharp Mask. And you can see Unsharp Mask just does a wonderful job. It's not applying it to the edge right here at all. Just default out of the box. Smart Sharpen, we're getting a lot more, especially look right in here as I turn this on and off. You can see it's sharpening that area. So we need to paint that out of the mask. So I'd need to come in here and change the way it's being applied. So I can just take my color black. I can say, hey, I don't want this area to be sharpened anymore. Take that out. So when you get areas that don't look good sharpened, remember, it's not really about the method. It's about telling Photoshop not to apply it in those areas. So now Smart Sharpen looks good. I still think Unsharp looks better. If we turn Unsharp Mask on, you'll notice that area doesn't get sharpened at all because of that tolerance that we have on the threshold. So let's turn on High Pass. High Pass gives us a lot more sharpening out of the box. Look, it's a lot stronger. And I think that's why a lot of people like it, just because it's stronger. I can easily lower the opacity. So I can click up here and I can lower the opacity. So we're getting less of that sharpening. Now, just like before, where it's sharpening way too much here in the skin, I can click on this mask and then we can go in here and I can control the size of my brush, make it a little smaller, and we can just take that out of the skin area. And that kind of fixes the problem of the sharpening. Now, this we use threshold, this we use the mask. Let's go ahead and turn on the blur method. You can see the blur method, just like before, it's doing a little bit too much. So I'm going to click on the blur and I'm going to lower the opacity because it's a little bit too strong in the amount. Remember, we're not controlling the amount. It's the technique and the blending mode that's applying the blur. So it's not a big deal, an issue to lower opacity in any layer. I do this just about all the time. And just like we did before, so it doesn't apply it to the skin, we're going to paint black in areas where we don't want this being applied. So any of these methods can be used. They're all vary just a little bit, but it's how you apply it to the image. In a portrait, we don't want skin or blurred or background areas to actually be sharpened because it doesn't benefit us. So by using a mask, we can easily take those out of the areas using any of these methods. And all of these 4 methods work good as far as sharpening. So one of the issues that you run into with architectural photography, and I'm just going to duplicate this background so it's easy to see. You'll notice we've got our image at 100%. Remember, you want to sharpen your image at 100% of the image. You can see right here, there's a weird gray dot. That's actually dust on your sensor. If you ever see anything like that, that's dust on a sensor. You need to clean that off. So right here, we've got our layer. We're going to go ahead and we're going to sharpen this, and we're going to over sharpen this. It's easier for you to see. So we're going to go to sharpen. We're just going to use Smart Sharpen because it's not really about which one of these methods we use. It's about the issue. And so I've got 10. I've got a really way too much sharpening. So you can see you get this white line. And in architectural photography and just some people in landscapes, they like to really over sharpen their image. As far as I'm concerned, they're over sharpening their image. But one of the things that happens when you over sharpen and you use a large radius, you get that weird halo that goes around the image. So obviously doing a better job of sharpening is going to really solve most of the problem. So if I go to sharpen and I go to Smart Sharpen and I just do this at a regular amount of sharpening. So let's go down to, like, let's say that much. That looks pretty good. And I lower my radius to something normal, like 1 pixel. You'll see you're not getting that halo and you're sharpening your image. So let me turn it off. So here and here, but you're not getting that dramatic sharpening. Realistically, you don't need to over sharpen images, but some people like to really sharpen images. So let's go in here and we're going to really sharpen this image. So we're going to go to filter, sharpen, Smart Sharpen. So I've changed my settings to 121 and a radius of 111, and that's giving us a really strong amount of sharpening. But when you do this, it's giving us that halo that we see right here. So one way that you can get rid of that halo a little bit is to use blend diff. So if you come out here into the gray and you right click, I've seen people where they actually sharpen and they make a darken and a lighten layer. That's just like a total waste of. It's much easier just to click on here and use this. So you're going to use blend diff. And so what we're going to do is we're going to slide this over. We're going to say, hey, we don't want as much in the highlight area. We just want it in the black area. So all the way to the right, it's keeping it in the black area. If you hold Alt or Option, you can split these. And what this does is make the transmission a little bit lighter. And now you can see by sliding that, we've removed the highlight edge of the sharpen, but we've kept the black area. So go ahead and click OK. I'll turn this on and off. You can see we're getting that sharpening, but we're not getting it on the highlight side as much as we are on the dark side. So that's one way to kind of over sharpen an image, but back off on the highlight side, which helps remove some of that halo in an image. Well, that's all I know about sharpening. Hopefully you've learned a little bit. It's not about the method as much as it is as the process and what you apply it to an image. I know that some of these methods are a little bit complicated. They're really easy. You can easily make an action to sharpen an image. So if you don't want to go through the whole process of doing it, it's really easy to make action. I've got plenty of videos on making actions. Don't forget about the new Facebook group that I have. The information is below. It allows you to post an image. A lot of times I can't tell what your issue is without seeing your image. So by being able to post an image in there, it lets me more effectively give you an answer to your question. If you do have any comments or questions, you can post those below. Hey, and don't forget to subscribe.